See, it's awesome. Good to have you all here. So we're at 3:30. Again, Ginny.
Okay, I'm Jeannie Darling from Cornell Cooperative Extension in Delaware County, and we're very excited today to begin a series on growing resilience. We have invited Extension staff across New York State to be with us today, as well as members of our county community. And we're hoping that you'll find this session one of the beginning ones that you can actually start growing your own resilience. As you know, Cooperative Extension's mission is education, and we're really involved in growing healthy families, confident youth, successful farms, and stronger communities. And in the COVID environment, we're really focusing on starting with ourselves to be strong so that we can actually help others be strong. And so building resilience helps us do that. And so we want to welcome you today and tell you that we will be doing this series for the next 3 months. We are going to have our second session on November 19th. It will be focusing on growing resilience in communities. If you are working in that field and growing resilience in your community, we'd love to hear from you so that we can include you in our program on November 19th. And then in December, we are going to culminate our series with a conference on growing resilience. That will be December 8th and 9th. And Julika will tell you a little bit more about our speaker and what we're going to offer. But we hope that you can join us for all of these great events. We know that there's lots that we could share with you. We are excited also that we can offer some resources, and we will also be looking at some challenges. That our first challenge we will be presenting today as part of our program. So we have today an opportunity to learn and also to participate because we have breakout sessions today. So we can certainly get your ideas, and we're looking forward to the next hour of sharing techniques and resources with you to grow resilience. And we're focusing really on growing resilience today, starting with us, ourselves. So I'm going to turn it over to Julika, and she's going to introduce herself and start our presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ginny. And I just have to say, it is such a pleasure to collaborate with colleagues in the broader field across New York State. And it's really wonderful to be here with you all today. So yeah, my name is Julika von Stackelberg. I'm a family and community resilience educator at Cornell Cooperative Extension in Orange County. And here's a quick snapshot again of what we're going to talk about today. As Ginny has already given an introduction and to how we kind of came to the series. And so you already received that. And then we're going to now look at our understanding about resilience. What does that mean? So we'll get a quick overview of the ACE study. I'll explain that in more detail, the science of resilience, and also our social ecology and how all of that plays within each other, and how that then translates into our own individual resilience zones and how we can grow these zones even further. And then we'll talk to you more about the challenge that Ginny just mentioned. I know that some of you on here are probably familiar with some of this, but if you're anything like me who has been diving into these topics for the last few years, I can continue to learn new things. So I hope that you too will be able to learn something that is new to you. Great. And then we will have a little breakout session later on. But in the meantime, if you would please mute your microphone just to be sure. And at the moment, everything is beautiful and quiet. So thank you. Just to be sure that we have a good sound here. And this is recorded. So on today is what date is it? The 8th of October. And you will all receive the recording of this webinar. Okay, so let's first look at how we got to this understanding about resilience, because I think, or I'm pretty sure that, depending on what field you're in, you might associate resilience with something different, and we might come up with different ideas. And so when we talk about resilience in this context here, I want to kind of bring you the aspects or the background that informed us. So first of all, there was research on trauma. And that was in great deal done with veterans who had returned from war zones and were struggling with what we now know as post-traumatic stress disorder, so PTSD. That was really some of the first real studies, long-term studies that were done that helped us get a better understanding of what trauma means and what that looks like, as well as modalities to help heal from trauma. Another area that informed our understanding of resilience is disaster recovery. So what we actually can see in at the West Coast at the moment with wildfires or floods in other places, how a community is able to recover. There's a lot of resilience or studies about resilience and how folks have been able to return basically or bounce back from these adversities. And so that has informed this field of study quite a bit as well. And then the third aspect here that I want to highlight is the adverse childhood experience study. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail in a moment, as well as brain science, specifically in the last 10, 15 years, that has really helped us to understand and articulate things in a different way. So I like to look at this as different pieces of a puzzle. And so when we begin to put these together, we're really able to see a picture emerge that then helps us to better understand the impact of trauma, what trauma looks like, but even more importantly, our ability to heal and recover. So about 20 years ago in the late 1990s, and I know that many of you are familiar with this, there was a study conducted that was one of the largest studies ever done in the United States, called the Adverse Childhood Experience Study. And it kind of came about in an accidental way through a weight loss program that tried to understand how come individuals are really successful at losing a great amount of weight, and then all of a sudden something takes place in their lives, or even nothing, and they're regaining the weight. So by accidentally asking a question that revealed this particular patient's childhood trauma, which was sexual abuse, the doctor had just begun to pay attention to other abuses that he had learned about, or adverse childhood experiences really, from other patients. And so he began to connect the dots. And eventually, this was Dr. Felitti, who then connected with Dr. Ander at the Center for Disease Control's. This study was done over many years. with 17,000 participants that found that if individuals experience in the first 18 years of life the abuse, and that included emotional abuse, physical abuse, or sexual abuse, or they experienced neglect, that meant also not feeling loved, or emotional neglect, physical neglect, or they experienced challenges in their home environment, such as witnessing domestic violence, or having a family member who is struggling with substance abuse or mental illness, or having a parent who was incarcerated or going through parental separation or the loss of a caregiver. If these experiences occurred in a child's life before the age of 18, it led to what they call toxic stress. And we'll talk about that in a little bit some more too. And it showed that the more of these experiences children had, in other words, an accumulative, so to speak, or an accumulation of these experiences, the higher their risk was for heart disease, lung disease, diabetes, uh, even their mental health and well-being, so the increased risk for suicidality or other drug abuse and other risky behaviors. So this kind of picture here is a really good summary of what this shows, as you can see, and this is provided by the 7030.uk, which really hopes that they reduce the number of ACEs by 70% in 2030. So that's the initiative. If you like, check out the website. They have some really interesting information there. But so in other words, what we learned, and why is this really relevant to what we're talking about? What we learned is that the impact of toxic stress on our long-term health and well-being, specifically in childhood, really matters. And while that doesn't mean that we're doomed, or that by having these experiences, having had these experiences, we're doomed, there are also opportunities now to look at what are the factors that really help to protect us when, for example, we experienced difficulties? Because we all know that life is not easy, and things happen. And therefore, there are still possibilities to help buffer the stress and to really develop what we then call resilience. So we'll look into that now. But before we go there, I want to talk to you about the brain, because this really helps to sort of make the connection between the experience of toxic stress and also the ability to become resilient, or to develop that skill, resilience as a skill. So if you think about the brain in these three parts that you can see here, and with the red part on the very right side at the bottom of the brain being the survival part, that is where kind of our instincts are housed. This is where our breathing is controlled, the blood flow, heartbeat, body temperature, all of the functions that we really need. So I can just see there are a couple of chats, and I want to make sure it doesn't have anything to do. Great. Thank you for introducing yourselves, folks. I just want to make sure my sound is all good. Somebody ping me if I sound out. So the instinctual part of the brain is really the part, as I said, that just controls the functions that keep us alive. And so then the next part of the brain that I want to talk about is the limbic part of the brain, which houses our emotions and our feelings. This is the yellow part. And that then leads us to the cortex, our thinking part, the blue part. That's really where our decision-making, rational thinking, and so forth takes place. So our brain is not fully developed until the age between 25 and 30. And of course, we also know today that we can continue to rewire our brain, so to speak, and learn new things. So this whole saying about you can't teach an old dog new tricks is not true, because we can always learn new things. But really what the key is that all of the wiring that takes place between the neurological, or the laying of the neurological pathways, is what takes place in childhood. And so here's what happens. And of course, children have access to their thinking, and it develops specifically in the first 5 years very quickly. but still they are not as much in control and to basically self-regulate what it comes down to. And so what happens is that as we maybe, going about having a great day, and all of a sudden, let's say we're going for a walk, and all of a sudden we see a bear. And so what takes place is that we might feel fear. And so here now, while the cortex was totally in control right now, all of a sudden the part that takes over is the middle part, because now that's where the feelings are housed, right? And in that middle part, it becomes really active, and the feeling may get really intense. And so what happens, if you actually imagine, if you can see my fist, if you imagine that this is the survival part here, this is the emotional part, and this is the higher part of the brain, what happens is that now if emotions get very intense in here, and they activate through a gland called the amygdala. And now the amygdala, which is also considered the smoke detector in our brain, says, wait a minute, are we at risk? And so what happens is our lid flips, our blood flow is now pushed to the survival part of the brain in order for us to be able to have the fight, flight, or flee response, so that we can maintain, that we can survive, we can be fine. And we can get away from the bear or hide or whatever. We do not want to be in a situation where we start to argue, oh, I read a study once, or did we have to sing happy birthday or clap our hands? If your higher part of the brain starts arguing with itself and thinking about the situation, then we might lose some really valuable time to get ourselves to safety. So that said, this mechanism is really, really important. And now what happens is when we experience toxic stress, it's the same thing. Our basically survival mechanism gets activated because we have some really intense feelings, and you'll see this in a moment. And what happens is that then our survival part of the brain is overactive, as opposed to the parts of the brain developing in the thinking part and the emotional part that really help us self-regulate and make sense of the world. And this is what then leads to impacts on the rest of our physiology in our development, especially if this takes place on an ongoing basis when our bodies are developing. Okay, so next I want to show you this picture here. If I asked you which picture presents the stress brain, and you put in the chat, tell me, is it the left or is it the right? Which one do you think is the right one? See what's everybody saying. The right?
Left? The green looking one.
Yes, the green looking one. Somebody says.
Cassandra.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So actually the brain that is stressed is indeed the right side. And why? Because what we can see here is that the parts of the brain that are fully flooded with blood are basically only the parts that are the survival parts of the brain, right? So this is the more closer to the stem part of the brain. So on the left side, we see a brain that is fully flooded with blood, which means all of the parts are active. So this gives you a pretty good picture of what it looks like, when we feel stressed. So if we're trying to solve a problem with a brain that looks like the one on the right side, we might have trouble because we don't have access to the same abilities, that really help us solve some of these problems. Okay, so let's talk about resilience, because that's really the next piece here. So resilience comes from the Latin word resilire, which means really to rebound or recoil or spring back, right? And then the Merriam-Webster dictionary tells us that resilience is the ability to recover or adjust easily to misfortune or change. And so this is the thing. So when we talk about resilience and what we need to take into consideration in light of these puzzle pieces that we're just putting together, is that, the definition is often we bounce back to a situation. But if you consider that a lot of times that resilience is really needed when we have experienced a traumatic experience, much like what we're still experiencing with this pandemic, we're not going to be able to bounce back to where we were before. Things are changing. So really it is important that we're able to adapt and really adjust to these changes and the difficulties that are taking place. And so here is the piece that I want to show you in terms of how that looks inside of us and how we can now relate basically our individual ability to be resilient. And resilience really is an innate capacity that we all have that has to do with how our brain really works, as we just talked about, because it's a skill that we learn. However, it is a skill that needs to be nurtured as opposed to be debilitated by experiences that we have. And so this nurturing piece is the one that is so critical for us when we are talking about resilience in this bigger context. So here is what we call this resilience zone. This is our own individual resilience zone. And some of us have a really broad bandwidth and others have a really narrow bandwidth. And neither one is gooder or, better, so to speak, than another one. That's just how it is. And can we grow this bandwidth? Yes. And we will talk about that in a moment too. But what you see in front of you is basically the normal ebbs and flow in life, right? So we have different emotions that we go through as we're going through our experiences in our everyday lives. Sometimes the emotions get a little intensified, then they're going to ebb down a little bit. Sometimes they intensify, right? So sometimes, as you can see, we feel calm, or then we might feel excited. It might even go into worrying. And eventually we're all tired, or then maybe relaxed, or sometimes sad. We feel happy or angry and scared, right? So those are all emotions that take place and that basically come along with our sympathetic and parasympathetic response that takes place in our bodies. So, much of what we just looked at in the brain, basically, if you think about the brain being fully online, that was the brain that is totally flooded with blood. Now that part of the brain is experiencing really intense emotions. And so then that means the blood flow goes into this emotional part, which therefore is then activating the survival part that is ready to rescue us should we need to be rescued. And so here we can see what that looks like. Imagine there is some kind of a trigger or a stressful event, right? It could be a pandemic, it could be a job loss, it could be we lose a family member or a loved one, but it could also be constant, struggle to make ends meet. Whatever it is, it's some kind of a trigger that basically accelerates our emotions or intensifies our emotions so much that we fall out or jump out or go past the higher zone, our resilience zone, and we're stuck in that higher zone. And the way that we know this is that we might experience extreme edginess or irritability. We might feel really anxious or even panic and so angry and mania and pain, right? I can relate. I've had those experiences. So what that tells us is that basically now we are in that zone that is really activating the survival part in our brain, which means that that also has, because if you think about an emotion, you could call an emotion an action requiring neurological program. In other words, every emotion requires that an action takes place inside the body, and that stimulates a neurological program that is now set into motion. And really what that is there for ultimately is to get us back into the resilience zone. But sometimes it also has messages for us that tells us that, we're out of bounds. we it's about these things in our lives that we may feel so triggered by. And on the other hand, we might get stuck in the low zone. And this is where we experience depression or sadness or isolation or exhaustion or fatigue or numbness. And so experiencing any of those feelings basically, again, is a sign that our emotions have gotten so intense that our survival part of the brain is being constantly activated. So the key is that we learn what those emotions are, the triggers are, so we can basically get us back into the resilience zone, right? So when we experience, so the more we become what I like to call our own detectives, right? And we analyze without judgment, detective just takes notes and collects, facts and information. So we're just going to collect and act, wow, I'm so edgy and I just flip at everything that happens around me. And then we can ask, I wonder what's going on, that's the case. Or we may just give ourselves some empathy, right? So saying like, yeah, I mean, I don't know what to do in a pandemic and the news get crazy every day. I don't know what to do. And so just to name those emotions can help basically tame some of these emotions. And what takes place then is that by naming these emotions and identifying the emotions that we have, if they are in that part, in that category, is that we're basically bringing our higher part of the brain slowly back online. And then we can take steps that really help us to basically return into that resilience zone. Okay, so this is really, I think, the picture that is, that we can apply to ourselves, but that indicates that also a lot of these factors or triggers may sometimes come from the outside. And so this is why this conversation is so important to continue even next month, because then we're going to focus on community. Because the fact is really that sometimes these experiences, adversities, whatever you want to call them, triggers that we have, that they might be outside of our own control, right? They might be in our systems. Some of the questions that the A study did not ask is, for example, considering experiencing racism or experiencing bullying or, cyberbullying, which we now experience a lot more. Or having a family member who has been deported, or living in really great uncertainty, or having not feeling safe in the environment that you are in. Any of the experiences basically that set us to be in a constant mode of stress or toxic stress, that basically put us into either the high zone or the low zone where we get stuck. These are all, these may be factors that really come from the outside. And so therefore it's important to note that, resilience is not a do-it-yourself project. While we can do a lot to help us learn to self-regulate within, these emotions, we also need to recognize that there are factors in our environments, and that's this social ecology, that basically debilitate our ability to be resilient. And so therefore it's important to make this really long, connected conversation, because if you think about ourselves kind of at the center of all of our universes, then we have our families around us, we have our communities around us, and we have, our broader communities and institutions around us. And, it goes all the way out until, we have a global picture. So if you think about it in that way, and all of those constantly interconnect with one another, and all of this influence how our brain basically responds. And so therefore, we don't have to be so hard on ourselves when we feel, depressed about situations that are taking place. There are things we can do, but the community part, or the community aspect of this, is a really important one as well. Okay. So now let's talk. I'm going to take you off here in a moment from this question, because what I really want to do now is break us into groups. And I want you all to talk about, I'll break you into groups. I'll take a look in a moment how many folks we'll have in each group. And what I want you to do is spend time and talk about what strategies have you applied that helped you get unstuck or back into your resilience zone in the past. And then the second question I want you to talk about with one another is, how can you grow your resilience zone? What are some of the things that you can do to change the bandwidth, to expand the bandwidth of that resilience zone? And just give me a moment to break us out here. I need to just stop the share. Okay. And I will tell you, and we'll put you probably in groups of 4. So you have about 10 minutes, and I'll add a little bit of travel time to that. Okay, so you'll be in groups of 3 to 4 and really take time to talk about this. Again, what are some of the strategies that you have done already in the past? And then what are some things that you can do to continue to increase the bandwidth of your resilience zone? So all you have to do is you have to accept or click join. You have to accept the link. And in 10 minutes, I will send you, in 9 minutes, you will get a notice that says you have 1 more minute, and then you return. And I would love to invite those of you to really share the mic, basically. If you normally don't feel as comfortable, maybe you are willing to challenge yourself a little bit. If you feel really comfortable, maybe you are going to listen to others also. So this is hopefully a really wonderful opportunity to learn from each other. Okay, so here we go.
in our brain.
There.
Oh, where is it? You are.
You ask for help?
Yes, the questions.
The questions?
Yes.
Yes, so the first question is to talk about what are some strategies that have helped you in the past to get back into your resilience zone? And then what are some things that you might be able to do in order to increase the bandwidth of your resilience zone? Make sense?
Yes.
Yes, got it.
Awesome. Okay, see you soon.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, so folks are coming back slowly. And we'd love to see little ones join us too. Yeah. Okay, great. We'll just give it one more moment. All right. Yeah, so thank you all. I hope that it went mostly smooth. I am curious if some of you are willing to unmute themselves and share. If you're not in a position to unmute yourself, then you are also welcome to share in the chat, but we'd love to hear some of your insights from the conversations you've just had.
Okay. Okay, our group, we were number 7, and we really started to have an interesting, fun, kind of friendly discussion about nature, where we live. But we did all seem to note that nature, going for a walk, and those were the kind of things that we use to that strengthen our resiliences. We didn't get to so much about growing it, though.
Okay. Good. Maybe there are others who've talked about this, but identifying those places is wonderful. Nature is definitely always comes up. Someone in the chat said also self-determination and self-care. Yeah.
Yeah, that's me who said that. Julika.
Yes, I saw Danu. Thank you. Yes. What else did you notice, or what else did you talk about? Who else is willing to share?
Julika. So our group 2, talked about how we think reflection is a huge part of growing your resilience. And, maybe writing down when you're not feeling too well, if you're feeling a little upset or depressed, writing down what you're feeling and, what's going on. And then at another time, maybe when you're in a better mindset, you can look back at it and reflect and kind of put into perspective maybe what triggered you and maybe figure out what you can do differently to avoid those triggers.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah. So, and you mentioned at a different time. So just to be sure that when the brain is back online, you can revisit and go through this. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Your judgment is working again.
Yeah.
So our group discussed techniques that we used to kind of confront emotions. Like I stated, positive words of affirmation. We talked about therapy. We talked about exercising, just staying active, and different things that we did to encourage positivity. Doesn't always work, but just, positive reinforcements to kind of combat and, things that don't require money or a lot of time. They just come kind of like naturally, like second nature.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Our group, one of the last points that we made before we ended was how difficult it is sometimes to, because of the different lines of work, our focus is to help others. It's really sometimes a struggle to do those things for ourselves. And it's easy to say to someone else and say and stay optimistic for somebody else and say, you know what, we're going to work through this, it's going to work out. But then to look through that lens for yourself and your own situations is a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, absolutely.
We talked a little bit about, oh, sorry. We talked a little bit about taking a moment to like allow yourself to feel a negative emotion, allotting some time in your day to like go through that. I think in an effort to be optimistic and positive, sometimes we forget to acknowledge that it's also okay to like feel what's happening, and then move on with your day. And as far as growing our resilience, I know I at least identified being better at asking for help when you need it. So like recognizing like I've used my skills. I've reached a point where like maybe I need someone to step in and take on a task for me, or someone to just like listen when I have to vent what I'm feeling. And that's definitely, I think, an area when you're in a helping profession, you get so used to doing the helping, you forget sometimes to be able to ask for some yourself.
Yeah, our group said that too, Caitlin, like just understanding that stress is a normal part of the process also, that you really can't even survive without stress. And some key points we commented on were a lot of us work really well under pressure, under stress. You get things done. So that yeah, you definitely can relate.
In our group, we were chatting, like Caitlin was saying, as far as stress, not to try to eliminate the stress or to try to control it. It is what it is for things beyond our control. And recognizing that what you bring into the situation, as well as those around you from our own personal journeys, will affect how we handle whatever stress is coming our way. What I pretty much, I'll share with all of you, don't tell anybody, but my true phobia is zombies. And so I said, as long as we're not in the zombie apocalypse, I'll get through it. I've told my own kids, I will climb over you to get away from zombies. I'll jump in front of you for anything else. And so, yes, I know they're not really real. And no, I do not watch any zombie shows. Like, anyway, but my point is recognizing the journey that we've all walked, and not Walking Dead, the journey we've all walked, will impact how we handle all of these stressful situations. And it is okay to say no for things. We don't have to say yes to everything. And really just knowing when it's, I knew today was one of those days that, making sure I'm taking my lunch break, I'm getting some fresh air, just taking a quick pause. And now the rest of the day, I'm great. So we all have our limits, and to not wait until you get to your limit. Recognize when it's coming and step away before you get to your limit will make it easier to bounce back.
Yeah. Yeah, that's acting within your resilience zone, right? Noticing when you're getting to the edge. And Brianna, you said that, oh, thank you. I was just about to say, maybe you could post that link to the TED Talk. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I just listened to it recently and it was really insightful. I know for me, I worry about my worrying a lot, and I'm always thinking, oh my gosh, stress is bad. It's going to make me live less. It's just a struggle that I have. So watching this kind of helps me deal with that and think about it differently.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really important perspective too.
In our group, we talked about the importance of staying hydrated, which is huge. We know we should drink water, but we don't. I tell the kids in the classes that I teach in that, your body is like a vehicle. You have to do oil changes in your car. You have to put more water in your body so that your brain is healthy and you can think straight. And I think that's pretty important.
Oh, Seth, you're going to love our challenge today. I'm so glad you brought that up. So it will come in just a moment. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
I think another way to look at it is, you have to upload positive thoughts to download calm.
Somebody write that down, please. That's a good tweet.
Yeah.
A good quote. Thank you. Yes.
And I agree with the fact that stress is something that we can use to motivate us. It doesn't have to be something that holds us back. So it's all in our perspective. And just recently, I've been trying to do a learning video about stress management, and it's been very tough for me because I'm not very good with PowerPoint or Zoom or using them together. So it was really stressing me out. And then I had to take some of my own advice, and so I could hopefully get the video recorded. I'm not really sure if we're done with that yet, but hopefully I am.
Awesome. Yeah. And so to take away the idea that, we have to be perfect,
Right.
either in accomplishing something, but the same thing with our stress so-called
Right.
reduction techniques. You know, it's all practice. And yeah. Thank you all so much for sharing this. I'm gonna move us on because we have just a couple more slides for us here where we do have a challenge, and it really does seem like Seth was planted over here. So just 1 second as I am sharing my screen again. So I really hope that you all learn from one another, and also the fact that, you know, we have opportunities to share where we can talk about this sometimes can feel really good too. At least to me it does, and I hope you enjoyed it too. Okay, so here, Ginny will share with you about the challenge that we have. Ginny, darling, are you still here?
I am. Yeah.
Yay.
So what we wanted to do with our growing resilience is to really practice, right? We want to practice some things. And we thought a hydration challenge would get us started. So Megan is going to help us, and Karen, our team, and you'll be receiving an email next week. And you will find that we do have a hydration challenge for you to try. You'll get information about it and why it's so important. And with the challenge, it will help you look at a level for yourself and what you can do to keep your brain healthy. So what we want you to do is certainly look for our emails. We want you to take some pictures if you are involved in practicing hydration, sending them to Karen, and sharing the results so that we know that, you know, you are hydrated and taking that step. We may have some other challenges, and we're hoping that even if you have some ideas for challenges that you would share with us. We are, there's actually a sleep challenge that we might be presenting. That's one of our ideas. We were actually in a conversation with Cornell Wellness, and they were sharing the very important part of what sleep does is actually boost our immune system. And so that might be something that people could also look at in terms of making some positive changes that might actually increase their health and help them be more resilient. So, you know, if you have other ideas, let us know, but we're going to be sharing some challenges with you in the next month or two that, you know, we hope you'll participate in and let us know if it actually helps you, you know, be more resilient. So I don't know if Megan wants to say anything more, but, you know, she's going to be part of our team as well with our challenges.
Yeah.
Just
Megan,
stay tuned. Stay
Yeah.
tuned for more. And we look forward to doing this. I'm really excited about it, and you'll be hearing more. So I hope you'll join us. And it's a great way to feel a part of a greater community, even if we're not all maybe doing it at the exact same moment, but knowing that people beyond just your family or yourself are engaging in the same challenge. There's something to be said for that community. So we will stay tuned.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And really, you also can take this challenge into your own communities and replicate it there and invite others to participate. So we're really what Cornell Cooperative Extension System is here for is a resource for our communities. And so we're not the ones to have all the answers, but we have resources that you can utilize and replicate and get to. And we hope you do that with those too. So if I may just say one more last word quickly is that we for our next session, we're going to talk about initiatives, community initiatives to build resilient communities. And if you have a community or a community initiative or coalition already in place, we'd love to hear from you. If you could also email me or one of us here who's communicating with you, that would be really wonderful. We do want to hear from you. And we have a few more minutes, so we could take some questions. But I do want to let you know that we have a survey that we would love for you to fill out. I'm just posting that in the chat. We'll send it in email as well. But if you could fill that out, that would be really, really wonderful. And in the meantime, we can stick around here for some questions. But just for the sake, I want to remind you all that as mentioned in the very beginning, on the 19th, we'll have the Growing Resilience as a community, what I just mentioned. And then December 8th and 9th, we will have what used to be the Making Healthful Decisions conference that was scheduled for March and had to be postponed as a result of the pandemic, which is focusing on growing tools for resilience, or growing resilience and having actual tools, focusing specifically on schools, on health and human services, and the community at large. So we're planning to have 2 days. It's not full days, it's a morning session and an afternoon session, beginning with a panel discussion and then going into workshops with specifically focusing on either schools or health and human services in the community. And then on the second day, we'll have the keynote with Scarlett Lewis, who's the founder of the Jesse Lewis Choose Love Foundation, or a movement really. And we're really excited to bring her on and the work that she has been doing. So I'm just going to let you all know, here is our contact information. You're welcome to reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you, but we're going to stop share the slide in just a moment so you can ask some questions or, just stick around for a few more minutes. So, but I want to thank you all very much for coming and the team for coming on to put this together.
So I'm sorry, the flyer that I received said that the third part was going to be on December 11th. So is that a change?
I'm so glad you asked. It is a change indeed. And I made myself a note to make sure that we say it, and I forgot. So I'm so glad you're paying attention. Yes, so the idea is that the date was changed because the workshop for schools, many of the school districts have a flexible Wednesday or kind of a Wednesday where there's time allotted for professional development. So we wanted to make sure that we can include as many school staff or school members in our community who work or participate in the school environment. So therefore we scheduled that for Wednesday. And you will all receive a new link for registration. So you will have to re-register for the next series as well as for the conference. And the great thing is there's no cost for the conference. So that's woohoo.
Yeah, I think it's exciting that we were able to actually reschedule the conference. It happened that in the spring it wasn't able to be held because of COVID, and now we're able to do it virtually. So it'll be a virtual conference, so everybody can participate where you are and join us free, and we'll look forward to learning together. So it's been great to have everyone today. I want to thank Julika for all of her presentation, all of our team members for putting this together. And
thank you, yes.
We're looking forward to continuing to network this fall, and we're also looking at further training in the spring. So we hope you'll stay with us. We're definitely interested in starting with ourselves, growing our own resilience so that we can actually reach out and help others in our community and really learn how we can be more effective in helping others in our community to grow resilience. So I think this is the name of the game right now. We are still in a very challenging environment, as you know, and so we can, help each other and help others to get through this together. So we'll look forward to the challenge and what you do as far as your hydration challenge. Hearing from you. Thank you for completing the evaluation, the survey today, so we know if this was useful and helpful to you. And then we'll look forward to seeing you November 19th. Thanks so much for being with us. Have a wonderful day.